Hey guys, I'm Eric, and I'm here with Carl, and we're the developers behind Flamebreak, and we'd like to give you an idea of how the game plays, so we're just going to jump right into a run and show you what it's all about. So, one of the main engines of replayability in this game is the fact that each run begins with a totally randomized loadout. And so, in this run, Carl started with a dwarf. Dwarfs are pretty strong, but a little bit dumb. They're also very small, which helps with their dodging. They've got a good health pool, so hopefully Carl won't die while we're recording. They also have, as every race has, an activated ability. So in the case of the dwarf, it's the Earth Slam. You want to do an Earth Slam? Okay, so as you saw there was a shockwave through the ground and it stunned all nearby enemies. He's equipped with a dagger. Again, the weapon is randomized as well. So you could have a big old sword that hits multiple guys. You could have a crossbow. You could have a flaming staff that interacts in an interesting way with your spells. But in this case, he has a dagger. And the dagger's unique attribute is that it gets bonus damage when attacking from behind or attacking stunned enemies. So if you see some of the time while he's fighting these guys who whirl a big old hammer at him, he'll run behind them once they've sort of done their thing and hit them from behind for bonus damage. He also has two skills, and the two skills come from a shared pool. So every race and weapon combination can combine with every skill combination. And in this case, he has the hook, which you've seen him throw out now and then to pull in a single target. That works really well with his dagger, because his dagger is single target. It allows him to isolate a single enemy and burst them down to sort of change the odds in the fight. And right there, you saw him activate telekinesis. Telekinesis is a really interesting skill to use. Essentially, you turn one of your enemies into a bowling ball, and so you can fling them around. In that case, he grabbed a faerie, and he actually flung it into his player's character, which also deals damage. But one of the best ways to use it is against a cluster of enemies, is crowd control. You can actually grab the enemy you're most interested in dispatching and fling him into all the other enemies, and he'll take damage for each guy he bumps into, and he'll also stun them as well. So now we're in the first boss fight, and so there are multiple bosses in each realm. Again, a huge emphasis in the game design is on replayability. So every time you go through, you're going to run into different challenges, and you're going to have a totally different kit to dispatch with those challenges. And so this fight, you see he's using his hook to sort of bring in that ranged character and avoid the background obstacles. Well done. So what's your strategy here for your build? So a big thing in this game is that as you progress, you're going to be earning gold from every fight, and then you're going to have opportunities on the overworld map to figure out how you want to spend that gold. But again, the randomization applies to the map as well. So you're never quite sure what you're going to find, but again, there are patterns. So what are you looking for this run?
So I'm going to look for the blacksmith and the jeweler because they allow me to complete a set.
Okay, and so that's probably a really good choice with this particular build. Depending on what's available in this world, again, every time you play, there will be different powerful item sets spawned into this world. There will be stat boosters and simple stuff like that in some of the towns, but there will also be these epic item sets which grant powerful passive abilities that synergize or don't with your kit. And so in this case, he's found a set called Shadow Form Wrappings. And so the Shadow Form Wrappings are one of my favorite sets in the game. They essentially grant you a shadow follower that mimics every one of your skill invocations. So what he did is he bought a single piece of that set, which acts a lot like other standalone items. The single piece grants him a small stat bonus. There are a number of stats in the game. There's attack damage, which is going to modify how hard his dagger hits. There's attack speed, which obviously lets him attack faster.
Yeah.
There's also skill mastery and cooldown reduction, which are sort of the analogs of attack damage and attack speed.
Oh no!
And so
I didn't have my other set piece.
yeah, so he went to the blacksmith first and found a piece of the Shadow Form Wrappings, which will eventually complete. He found what is it you have, like the slippers?
Yeah.
So he's got Shadow Form boots, and if he can combine the Shadow Form boots with the other pieces of the Shadow Form set, he'll have a Shadow Mimic who follows him around and activates a skill every time he activates a skill. So for example, when he slams the ground, the Shadow Mimic will appear a second later and slam the ground again. That's a fantastic synergy because you're essentially chaining a stun there. So it's just giving him a longer crowd control capability. But it's also going to mimic his hook throws. It's also going to mimic his telekinesis grab. So he actually has a build with really good disruption capability. He's got a lot of things that will essentially interrupt an enemy's attack pattern. And like MOBAs, for anyone who's familiar with those games, crowd control and stuns are very, very important elements of gameplay. Every enemy that attacks has a windup. There's something visually that you can identify in what they're doing, and they have a delay in actually activating their attack. So if you've got little ninja dudes who are throwing shurikens, they're going to pause for a second, they're going to power up, and then they're going to launch shurikens in every direction. And because he has all these stuns, he can choose to throw his hook at a guy who's charging up a shuriken attack, and thereby interrupt it. Here we just saw him use his Earth Slam to disrupt a Necromancer enemy. Necromancer enemies are particularly scary because they will raise the dead, and they'll keep the fight going for quite a bit longer if you if you give them the opportunity. So that was a good example of the disruption mechanics. Here he's now visiting a Wise Man, and the Wise Man is capable of or used to upgrade your skills. So he's decided to upgrade his hook skill, which increases its range, increases its damage, and actually the hook skill amplifies damage. So hook's fantastic when you're trying to burst down a single enemy, which again is a strength of his character because he has the dagger. The dagger provides really good single target damage. It struggles in the area of effect realm because you can only hit one guy at once. But with that hook, he can pull in a single target that he's looking to burst down quickly. He can bring them away from their allies that he would probably struggle to deal with simultaneously. And by bursting him down, he can slowly work towards a fight where he can actually handle a one-on-one situation. Here we see him fighting World 2 boss, and this guy is actually pretty tricky, but he's doing a good job. You see he's getting a lot of bonus damage as that charger runs past him with the dagger in the back. As you move through the game, you're going to be accumulating gold, and you're going to be looking at the overworld map for more opportunities to advance your character. Here, he's actually a little bit low on health because he took a lot of hits in that boss fight, and so he's spawned into the desert realm next to a town. And in this town, there will always be the opportunity for healing. There's also the opportunity to power up your guy in a variety of ways. So what he's actually just started there ties into the favor system. So within Flamebreak, there are 5 gods vying for control of the world. And each of the gods is at war with the others. Each of the gods grants a powerful blessing to his followers. And so in this case, he's purchased a necklace to Fuhrer, the god of rage, who calls lightning from the heavens. So if he is able to develop enough favor with that god, which he's developed a little bit by buying the necklace, but you could develop more by, for example, crushing that temple. I'm pointing at the camera as if people can tell what I'm looking at. But anyways, there is a temple to Fuhrer, he's the red god, on the overworld map. And so if Carl were to visit that temple and dispatch of all the enemies there without destroying the temple, Fuhrer would see that as a sign of strength and a sign of respect, and therefore his favor with Fuhrer would grow. And when he gains enough favor with Fuhrer, Fuhrer will actually start calling down lightning on Carl's enemy. And so, in the case of Fuhrer's blessing, that basically means damage amplification. Every time you hit an enemy, lightning comes down and strikes a random enemy. And that can be really useful with, for example, this single target dagger build that Carl has, because sometimes it's going to be hard to get to an enemy in the back lines or something like that. But he can pull an enemy towards him, beat him up with the dagger hook combo, and then Fuhrer will be bringing down lightning on the other enemies while he does that. So that's kind of a nice thing to exploit with a single target build. Here we've got a mini boss fight, and so this little dude is actually pretty tricky, blinking around constantly, throwing projectiles. And meanwhile, we've got tumbling rocks from the canyon walls that he's got to dodge. And so a little hint here, something that Carl should probably be doing, is because the rocks are coming from the south, you probably want to try to position yourself towards the north. That gives you a little lead time to react to them. Again, that's one of the design principles behind the game, is that everything is fair. There's no room that you're going to walk into where we've just randomly decided to give you a bunch of enemies that cannot be dodged. Every enemy has a pattern, every hazard has a pattern, and by learning them, and learning, all the little cues and all the little interactions between your skills and enemy patterns and exploitable patterns in their attacks, you can actually avoid damage in essentially every fight. Now, it's pretty hard to play perfectly all the time, and as you can see, Carl is deathly close to the end of his run here. But the fact is, with perfect play, you can almost always avoid all damage. And so it's very interesting to learn how everything fits together and to get better at the game. And as you get better, you're going to have more opportunities to build your character in different ways and set up really powerful runs. Ultimately, the goal of every run is to kill one of the gods. And so I won't go into the storyline too much. That's something you can check out if you pick up the game. But ultimately, there are a variety of endgame scenarios. And so depending on the scenario that has been spawned for you, again, a randomized element, you might want to build your character in different ways. One of the gods is known for summoning huge hordes of enemies. And so Carl's build, for example, would probably struggle there unless he spends some time maybe powering up his Earth Slam ability, which is an area of effect crowd control ability, or his telekinesis. Another god makes his followers very fast, and so in that case you would probably want some movement speed and some health to survive through his encounters. But again, it all depends on what your kit has. You might be a faerie who has a blink ability. That gives you a huge ability to dodge no matter what. In that case, you might be prioritizing your damage output. You might be prioritizing your skills depending on, again, what's available in your kit. Here we've seen that Carl finally completed his shadow form wrapping set. So if you look, every time he activates a skill, for example, when he grabbed that boss, a shadow duplicate appeared a second later and grabbed the boss as well. When he slams the ground, after a short period of time, the shadow appears and slams the ground, and that can be super useful for controlling up these guys. This boss summons a variety of little dudes to try to make room and make food. So he actually likes to summon guys, let you kill them, and then eat them. And as he eats them, he charges up. So Carl, because his build has a lot of disruption capability, because he's got Hook and Telekinesis and Earth Slam, every time he sees that boss go in to eat one of its little dudes, he's just stunning him. And by doing that, he's prevented him from actually growing. So now he's a fairly easy boss to deal with, now that he's slowly picked apart all of his followers. So as he comes into this next region, I'm going to talk a little bit about the overworld map options. So you've seen Carl kind of racing through things because he knows exactly what he's doing, but a fun and interesting part of the strategy in the game is really navigating this overworld map to get the most value out of it. Carl just activated Spyglass, which reveals some information about the randomized map, and he uses that to help plan his path through this fight. Here he's actually fighting against Führer, the god of rage, whose favor he currently has, and so you notice he's very careful not to deal any damage to the temple. Meanwhile, Führer's blessing is responsible for those lightning bolts that you see periodically. So that makes the fight quite a bit more challenging, but if Carl can avoid destroying the temple, which would stop those lightning bolts, then he will gain further favor with Führer, and he'll actually get a more powerful lightning assist from Führer, essentially. Anyways, back to the overworld map. By activating the Spyglass, Carl has revealed certain things on the overworld map. There are certain things he could be looking for. For example, mini-boss fights provide bonus gold. There are secret treasure lairs hidden in the mountain. There are blacksmiths and jewelers. He might want to start another item set. There are also towns and bazaars, and towns tend to sell some of the more straightforward items in the game, including stat boosters, but they also sell overworld items. That's also where you get your healing. And they also sell a few funky items, such as that necklace that grants him favor with Führer. The bazaar provides, which he's revealed along the right side of the map, provides the most interesting items of all in the stat pool. There are things that can provide giant growth and huge attack damage boosts. There are items that modify overworld map items, so there's a huge variety of stuff to check out. And again, depending on your build and as you learn the items that are available within the world, you're going to start thinking, you're going to start building strategies. I think I'd like to power up my skills a little bit. I know that there's a particular item at the bazaar that would synergize well with my build. There's a particular set, perhaps, that you've noticed spawned into this world by visiting the jewelers or blacksmiths that might work with your build. And so that's something that you'll explore. And so now he's, by destroying a rival's temple, in that case, who was that, Necros?
Yeah, that was Necros.
So by destroying Necros' temple, he actually gained a little favor with Führer, because again, all of the gods are rivals. And so he's now actually made progress on another epic item set. This set is super cool because it freezes enemies that are low on health. It actually slows down all enemies. And because he's a melee character, it's very useful to slow down enemies to give yourself a little more opportunity to react to their attacks. Again, as I said earlier, every enemy attack pattern can be dodged, even by a melee character, but there are many situations where it feels a little more frantic up close, and for that you get extra damage as a melee character generally. But because he's always in the thick of things, Frostwalker's, what is Frostwalker's set called?
What's it look like?
What's the actual name of?
Oh, it's Frostwalker's Resolve.
Okay, so Frostwalker's Resolve provides a slow effect to nearby enemies. Obviously, if he had a crossbow and he was trying to keep his distance from enemies, he might not always be activating that slow. But because, again, he's a dwarf, he's got this Earth Slam that lets him stand in the middle of a bunch of dudes and stun them all. Because he's got this melee range weapon, he's going to be in the thick of battle most of the time, and it means he's going to get a lot of value out of Frostwalker's Resolve. He's also going to constantly be triggering the freeze effect on Frostwalker's Resolve. So the freeze effect comes into play when an enemy's health falls below 25%. And so for many enemies, and especially given Carl's burst capability with this dwarf hook build, that freezing when they're low on health isn't going to be super useful, but against bosses, that's always a very, very useful attribute. And one thing that's especially useful is that certain bosses enter an enrage mode when they get low on health. So by picking up Frostwalker's Resolve, when he gets to some of these later game super scary boss fights, when the bosses actually get into their scariest enrage mode, they're just going to freeze solid and he's going to be able to break them. So it's a trade-off. He's opted not to pick up some attack damage boosters. He's opted not to pick up any health or survivability, which you see here makes these fights pretty scary. All it takes is a couple shots from these fairies to bring them down. And so he's got to read their patterns very carefully and stun them when they're going to get him. Get nervous for him. To stay alive, but on the flip side, if he can complete this set, he's going to have this really powerful slow effect, which is not only going to make it a lot easier for him to react to these enemies, but again, in the boss fights, it's going to be a huge boost. And so if he can make his way through here, he's now approaching the Worldfire Peaks, which is where you'll find the Phoenix, one of the first super powerful bosses. As you see, sometimes he has to back off in combat because certain guys have attacks that are dominating an area nearby. On the flip side, you've got that Grenadier he just hunted down, who actually wants to run away if you get too close. So that's actually ideal for his dagger, which provides bonus damage when attacking from behind. Now, this is going to be a difficult boss fight. This boss has 4 followers. Each of the 4 followers will occasionally laser into him, as you see there, unless they're disrupted, as Carl has been doing. And he kind of sort of walks around throwing off his own projectiles. So Carl's got to find his way, pick his way through this fight, and bring down each of these 4 guys without getting hit probably more than once. I think he got one in the thing. But you notice, despite his melee range, he's using that hook ability to pull guys in, and he used the telekinesis ability to stack guys up. By stacking up his enemies, he actually reduces sort of the fronts he has to watch for dodging purposes. So he only had to sort of look at 2 zones for where projectiles were coming from because he had stacked up the 4 little totem dudes into the corners. So what are you looking for now?
I want to finish this Frostwalker's Resolve, so I need to find the blacksmith. But I'm out of spyglasses, so I'm probably going to teleport around a bit hunting for it.
Okay, so on the overworld map, I've talked about it a little bit, but I never sort of got to the details as we enter a minigame here, which I haven't talked about either. But on the overworld map, you have looking glasses, which can reveal spots to help you plan your path. You have warp stones, which allow you to jump around, so that can allow you to jump past an impassable mountain, or simply navigate the map more quickly, as Carl's doing here, to try to explore more spots through adjacency rules. You also have healing potions, which you need to buy at the town, which you can activate to heal. Those can be very handy in case you're about to reach a boss and there's no nearby town. And there's also dust, and dust is a little bit interesting. Dust reveals additional item choices at adjacent shops when activated, and it can also reveal secret paths through the mountains, which can also mean secret treasure lairs, which provide bonus gold. So managing all of your overworld map items and prioritizing exactly how you spend them and exactly what you're looking for on the overworld map is a big part of developing your character and controlling your destiny in terms of challenges that you're faced with. You notice there are hazard fights. Each of these mini-boss fights contains a hazard. In this case, there are meteors raining from the sky. Those are something you may choose to seek out because there are additional item drops in those areas. Or they might be places you randomly stumble on, as Carl just blind teleported across the map. And they're pretty dangerous, but as you can see, the rocks hurt enemies too. So they don't always work against you, but they do always make the fight a little scarier. But now I think Carl is mostly looking to complete his Frostwalker set before the epic fight with the Phoenix. If he does that again once the Phoenix gets into his very low health and rage mode, he's going to have only a very brief window that he needs to fight through before Frostwalker's set comes into play. All right, so you've done it. You've got 2 sets online now. So again, he has the Shadow Form wrappings, and he has Frostwalker's Resolve, which means he's getting this huge amount of extra stun from the shadow duplicates of all his skills. And then as he approaches these guys, you're going to notice they start moving a little slower. They get a little blue tinge to them. If they get down to 25% health, they're going to freeze solid. Probably one. There you go. So one more hit on that jumping dude brought him into a frozen state. And so now anytime Carl's near to these enemies that are low on health, they're just going to freeze solid. He could just crack them, as he's doing now. But there are actually certain situations where that freezing effect is better than death. There are enemies, for example, a Necromancer can raise a dead enemy. So if you, instead of killing the enemies, you just get them low enough that they freeze solid, you can actually deny the Necromancers the opportunity to raise them. You can wait until you've beaten down the Necromancers, and then once you've killed them, you can dispatch the frozen enemies, and that avoids any possibility of them being raised. So there are a lot of interesting little synergies and interactions among the items and the enemy patterns. And exploring them is one of the really fun things about learning the game. Again, this particular build that he has is extremely different from a huge variety of other builds. So he could have been any of 9 races. Each of the races has its own activated ability. The Dwarf is great in a rough and tumble. He's got the HPs, he's got good damage, and Carl's leaning on that heavily. But, for example, if he was a giant, he would have a huge body, which makes it harder to dodge. He would have a boulder-style disruption ability and damage ability, so he would actually be a little more focused on damage and not on getting everything nearby with a single skill invocation. So his playstyle would have to adapt towards sort of keeping things in front of him where he can boulder multiple targets at once. He could play an elf. Elves don't actually have any direct stuns. What they have is the ability to summon roots from the ground and hold guys in place. And that synergizes very well with a variety of skills. There are a number of skills like, for example, a meteor strike, which has a long delay on it, that can be pretty hard to hit against mobile enemies, especially enemies that blink around. You finally maxed out your favor with your god.
Yeah.
And so Carl's now approaching the first, not the final boss fight in this game, but the first big boss fight in this game. And he's actually going up against the Phoenix with 2 sets in tow. I think this might be a good time to end the video. We don't want to show you exactly how to defeat all of the challenges in the game. And I'm sure when you try it for yourself, it will not be quite as easy as Carl has made it look. But we look forward to you checking out more of the game, and thanks for watching.
All right, see you guys.